NC21. Beth, if I start with you, just because you referenced it, when you talk about sort of, I guess, common mistakes that you either have done yourself in pitching and now on the other side see, give us a sense of some of the top ones. What are the most regular ones that you think are probably the most easily fixable for our watchers?
Okay, yeah, for sure. I'll start with my mistake just before I start berating other people. The mistake I always used to make, and then a very kind vice editor, which is where most of my stories end up, gave me this feedback, and it was really, really helpful. And it sounds like a really obvious thing, but it's super difficult. And that's to basically refine your pitch a bit more. Like, don't be so general when you send out a pitch. If I can use like a specific example, if that's okay. At the start of this year, I wrote a piece that thankfully people loved, and lots of people messaged me about it, about how sex toys were the new celebrity fragrance. Like, everybody just seems to have one. And when I first pitched that, it was a mess because I hadn't quite refined it enough. And I'd pitched it everywhere. And it was basically like how capitalism has came for sex. And I just hadn't thought about it enough because sex has been capitalized for like decades. So I think over the years, I had to basically learn to not just like get out the shower and pitch the thought I just had in there and actually stay with it for a bit, refine it, but also not refine it so much that there's no flexibility for the editor. You want them to be able to be like, love that bit, would love to tweak this bit. So that's certainly something that I had to learn. On the other side of the inbox, I think there's two very basic things that can be quickly fixed that come up a lot. And one, weirdly, is not knowing what type of article they're pitching. So I'll get a pitch that says, I would like to pitch an opinion piece, or I would like to pitch an essay. And then as I start reading it, it's just simply not an essay or an opinion piece. It's something else. And it might be really, really good. And personally, if the piece is good, I kind of go back and say, it's not what you've described it as. Or if I've pitched, I want essays and they're pitching features, I'll say, can you tweak it? Can we re-angle this? It's a personal story. But not all editors will. And sometimes I tell them that and say, this might be the thing that just gets your pitch moved to delete, which is savage, but that's the way it works. And I know it's happened to me as well. So that's certainly one I see a lot. And the other is just having no subject line. Quite a lot of the time I get emails that are just like, I want that, like, it just says, I want to write for X in the pitch, in the subject line, or it just says writing for you, like me personally. So I think snappy subject lines are guaranteed to get you an open and a read from top to bottom. So if they're not there, it's already a card stacked against you.
That makes absolute sense. And I will say from my experience of working on a comment desk for a bit, the quickest way to get your pitch not looked at, or potentially not given the fair hearing it deserves, is if you put the wrong name of the publication. You've pitched somewhere else, and then that's obviously been rejected or ignored, and then you go to another publication, which is absolutely fine. That's how it works. We all understand it, but if you're pitching to a publication, you should check it's the right one.
Yeah, I think as well, checking who's currently on the roster and who's left and stuff like that, which, to be fair to freelancers, the turnover is bad. Mastard seems to change every other day. But I think it's worth having a check. Just go on people's Twitters or have a look on LinkedIn and type editor at publication. Because at some of the publications I work at, we're still getting emails addressed to people who left years ago.
Oh, God. Yeah, no, absolutely right. And the turnover in the journalism industry is a bigger topic for another day.
It's a vocation.
On a more positive spin, I think. So I'm going to go to Jack now, if that's all right. So you are. I hesitate to use the word famous, but I'm going to use the word famous for your Twitter threads on things that you look for in pitches. Here are some things that I've commissioned. Here are some things that particularly caught my eye. Could you give me a bit of a sense of things from a more positive perspective about things that make pitches stand out when you're looking at commissioning things?
I was all fired up to be negative, and you've told me to be positive, so now I'm kind
of I'm sorry about that.
I found myself nodding all the way through everything Beth said. I agree. I think each of the things that Beth said all relate to the same issue, which is focus. The biggest consistent problem is that things are just a bit rambling, a bit unfocused, a bit not very clear. I'm trying to think of some of the pitches I have really liked, and one of the things I've noticed is they're not always things I commission. And that doesn't make them bad pitches, because I think the thing you want out of a pitch, of course, you ultimately want a commission, but the most valuable thing you can get is an immediate answer, yes or no. And the way you do that is you are upfront about what you want to do and what you have. The problem, I think, and I think, as like I said, I was nodding as Beth was saying this, is that I think a lot of people pitch themes, not stories, especially in business, where there's loads of trends and big stories. And someone will email me saying, oh, GameStop was a wild thing on the stock market, right? Like, oh, it really tells us a lot about tech and capitalism and da-da-da. And I'm like, yes, I know this. What are you going to say? The best pitches I get, just say up front what they have. Like often the first or second sentence will be, I have access to this person. I have this data. I have read this report. I have this take on this subject, and I will do this. Because remember that if an editor says yes, the conversation immediately moves to logistics. It immediately moves to when, who you're going to talk to, what's the headline, what for, and you need to be ready for that. And I think a lot of pitches are kind of a bit, well, I want to write on this theme. So I think, funnily enough, the best pitch I can remember is actually something I didn't commission because it wasn't quite right for us, but it was a tech pitch about hackability of technology from quite a well-known journalist. And it immediately said, I have this byline for another publication in which I wrote a very similar story to this. This is how what I want to write for you is different. And here's 2 bullet points as to, 800 words summarized in 2 bullet points. Now, in the end, I said to him, look, I don't think this is quite right because this is not quite in our subject area. But I gave him that answer immediately, and I gave him a detailed answer because I could read his pitch from top to bottom in 30 seconds, know exactly what he wanted to say and what he wanted to do. And because I got that immediate sense, it just jumped out at me. Even if it was a no, I still just said, okay, this is a no, but here's why, because I know exactly what you're going to say. So I can tell you exactly why this isn't going to work for us, and you can pitch it elsewhere. Like the things I really look for, and the best pitches are the ones that, within 50 words, I have a sense of what that journalist is going to do or say or argue or analyze or research. I sometimes get pitches where it's literally the last sentence where they say what they're actually going to do. They'll just recap a topic. And by that point, I've read through 200 words or 200, 300 words, either about something I already know about or something I didn't know about and still not very interested in. So the key is you've got to go in hard on what you are saying, and that should be a subject line. Like don't ask a rhetorical question. Don't make your subject line the theme. GameStop, yeah, great. Half of my emails I've got GameStop in them. Start with what you were going to do. Interview with X. Feature on Z and Y looking at whatever. Think of the big theme that's very newsy, and then think about what you plan to say about it. I often say there's a concept in American journalism that it's not very common over here, but it's Insider, we're obsessed with it. It's called the nut graph. And I assume most of you know what that is, but the nut graph is the paragraph. It's about 50, 75 words where you spell out what you are going to say and why it matters. And you can say that in a pitch. And I get that when you pitch something, you don't know what you're ultimately going to say because the research might take you in any different directions, but you can say with some certainty what sort of things you're going to be saying. That's what good pitches do. They just spell it out. And then the rest is detail. Because if it's a good idea and I know what you're going to do, and I know I can say to you, great, you've got 3 days, then I will respond to you and you will get one answer one way or the other. It will probably be a yes, could be a no, but you will get that answer. You will immediately get it back. I think a lot of pitches that get lost are the ones that are, middling, unsure, not very clear, not sure, and then they tend to get lost in just the ocean of our inboxes, which is a shame. But if you want a quick answer, be upfront with what you are going to do. Convince me that if I say yes, the next conversation we have about, logistics is already well in hand. You already know where you're going to go and who you're going to talk to and what you're going to say. That's the way to do it, I think.
Thank you. That was extremely helpful. And if I can go to Dhruva now, if that's all right. You're obviously an editor of your own publication, and then you referenced in your introduction a freelancer and a successful one in your own right. I'm interested from, I guess, the freelance perspective, and then you can reflect how maybe your perception's changed since your new role. People talk a lot about rejection within the context of freelancing, and I'm interested in how you how you frame your pitches to make sure that they're as successful as possible, but B, how you keep motivated in terms of pitching when you know that the majority of the times when you pitch something, it's going to be rejected to get to the one where you get commissioned.
So firstly, most of the pieces I write and I like to commission tend to hover above 1,000 words. The features in particular that I like to write are about 1,500 to 3,000 words. So when I am pitching something, I'm like, Jack, I actually like to pitch and receive pitches that show me the first paragraph within the opening paragraph of the email. So when I open that email or when I'm pitching something out, that first paragraph should tell me the who, what, the when, the where, the why, the how. You should be doing a lot of your research before your actual pitch, because like both Beth and Jack have said, you can't send something that's middling. You can't receive something that's middling either. And that's where the rejection comes in. And there have been editors, especially when I was starting out, who have taken the time to thankfully email me back saying, this pitch isn't fleshed out for these reasons. And especially because when you're pitching something, you should always, always, always say who you've written for before, maybe just 3 to 5 publications. If you haven't written for them, if you've written for any or many, just say that in your email. Because if editors get to that point, even if it's at the bottom or if you put it at the top, it might spur an editor on to respond to you. So when I get my pitches rejected or have gotten my pitches rejected in the past, I just tend to move on, but I've just developed a thick skin. I know initially it really used to bum me out. For example, I pitched NPR, who I've written for several times before, and I pitched them this really lengthy pitch. They never got back to me. And then a month later, the editor wrote this extremely long email rejecting me. But it was such a nice, considered email that it kind of like, it made my day that day. And then he was like, these are publications you should pitch to, because this is where it can land. And it ended up landing in one of the publications he recommended. And that allowed me to actually foster a relationship with him, where then I went on to write more for them. So in terms of rejection, I think it's just developing a really thick skin, which I know is hard to say because you have to be rejected about 3 dozen times for developing that thick skin. And it just comes as naturally as part of the job. Like every famous book, every famous author, every famous writer has been rejected. It's not just you. So remember, you're not the only fish in this pond. There's a lot of us who do get rejected. So don't be disheartened by it. And if anything, find a community of other freelance journalists. There's a community called Study Hall, for example, where they actually share their rejected pitches. And now I think there's a publication whose name escapes me, where you can send your rejected pitches to, and they will publish them. So your rejected pitches become published, which I think is really interesting. So yeah, don't be disheartened, I guess is the only thing I can say in terms of rejection.
Good advice in terms of pitching, and then I would suggest in life. Jem, if I can come to you, obviously through Journo Resources, you are an expert in the space, right? Like Journo Resources, if you haven't heard of it before, and I assume most of you have, but is a one-stop shop for budding journalists on it, not least in freelancers in terms of offering advice on pitching. So I guess, Jem, my question to you is, what are the sorts of things that people come to Journo Resources and you for on advice on the most? And if you have any sort of top tips on that. And then secondly, there was a question that I wanted I wanted to ask you just in terms of the fleshing out of a pitch and how basically how long they should be. Because again, I feel like you might have an insight in terms of what's helpful in terms of detail to include and whatnot.
Cool. Right, I'll try and tackle both of those bits. Just to say that, the newsletter that Dhruva just mentioned is called Missed Pitches, and I've just put a link in the chat, and it's super, super useful. And one small other thing I just wanted to add on to what you all three had just said, which I absolutely agreed with everything, is just, I think this is going to sound really, really simple, but just reading the publication, I think, makes so much of a difference. The amount of times we're a very small organisation, Journo Resources, in terms of getting pitches, but the amount of times I'll get pitches for something that clearly doesn't fit, and it's obvious it doesn't fit if you read the website, because we don't necessarily do news stories, or we don't do opinions. So And I think quite often when I've been on other desks, you do also get pitches which clearly don't fit or have been copy and pasted from a different place. My biggest advice to people kind of wherever you're looking to pitch is to, even if it's just half an hour where you skim through and, you know, look at the website and see the kind of stuff that they're doing. And I think that in a sense also ties into your other question, Richard, about how to kind of flesh out that pitch in. I think the same story would look very different pitched to each other as it would to Business Insider or Insider Business, whatever you said it's meant to be called now. Obviously that's a, you know, quite a glib example, but actually we all have to reskin stuff, but really thinking about who this is for and how that would particularly play out in that outlet, I think is the most important thing. And in terms of what people are kind of asking us for at Journal Resources, I'll put a link in the chat actually in a second. Because I think one of the biggest things that people typically ask us is, you know, what does a pitch look like? And so we are actually due to release next week a new pitching library, which basically just will have like dozens of examples of successful pitches. So I'll put a little sneak peek for you into the chat. But I think the one thing you will see in that is that actually they are all very different. For me, typically I tend to do about, if I'm pitching, about, you know, 3 decent paths, which have like a decent amount of kind of, you know, there's that intro, hello, my name is Jem, I've written for here, here and here, I've got this story. There's 2 kind of decent chunks of information, and that's how I tend to do it. But you'll see that, you know, other people I've worked with have put things in bullet points. Other people will kind of have a more kind of colloquial intro, which really kind of brings you into the storytelling. So I think it does kind of depend on how you want to sell that story best. I think my best advice to you would be, you know, make sure you do strike that balance of having enough in there. You've done enough of the groundwork. So I'd say at least 3 decent parts, but do make sure you go through and check it that you're not kind of, waffling on, and just have a look at what other people have done. I'll put in some examples in the chat, but equally just ask around. If you know friends who are freelancing, if you know friends that are editors, just get a look and get a feel of what other people are putting in, and that will kind of give you a better idea, I think, of how to kind of shape it and pull it together.
Perfect. Thank you, Jem. And yeah, as I said, I cannot overemphasize enough, Journo Resources, massive resource for you. That guide sounds like it will be invaluable, as pretty much everything is on that website. So please do check it out if you haven't already. Jack, if I can go to you, and then Beth, I'm going to come to you after that. So just on this one question for you, Jack, that I wanted to ask, which I thought was interesting because I don't know the answer to it. It's from Daniela. It says, when you are just starting out, is it acceptable to put your work with student publications? Have you got any advice for this aspect, especially introducing yourself? What information is good to put? What is good to avoid? So I guess the question is, if you're an editor looking at a pitch and you're looking at a byline, how do you feel about it being from a student newspaper, I guess, or a student outlet?
I wouldn't omit it. I wouldn't, I mean, it's better than, I am an undergraduate and I've just started and I've written for no one. I mean, obviously it does stand out less than established journalists who've written for rival publications that I think the professional, this work in professional context. In terms of, I mean, I feel like if you're worried that your bylines are a bit weak and you're only just started out, as everyone's are when they just start out by definition, perhaps consider putting them at the bottom. Because I tend to advise people to open with that, like, hi, I'm X and I've written for Z and Y. That's fine if it's the New York Times and the Guardian, but if you are brand new, perhaps consider putting them at the bottom, and perhaps consider emphasizing your connection to the story, your background, your whatever that is. I mean, some people, you might have special access to people because you are in the same community as them. You might, I did a story recently about Clubhouse excluding disabled people, and it was from a freelancer who was herself disabled, and mentioned that and said that she had access to these people who are, in the disabled community who are sort of trying to work with Clubhouse and not getting anywhere. And so that was an immediate, that was more relevant than the byline she had. I can't even remember what byline she had. I think she was relatively a novice, but I commissioned it because she had that kind of access. So if you're worried that your bylines are a bit weak, consider, and this is the only time I would advise this, consider putting them towards the bottom and then open with what you think is your strongest gambit. It could be, like I say, a personal connection to what you have. It could be you've already uncovered something really interesting, and sell me why you should do the story, and then put the bylines towards the bottom. But I wouldn't omit bylines that are, student publications and that sort of thing. It does show that you are starting out as opposed to haven't even got going yet.
Perfect. And then Beth, to you, just because you referenced in terms of framing in your introduction of your pitches, Kate's asked how much of your personality voice is worth including in your pitch. Is it better to keep it formal or not? What do you think?
Oh, this is an annoying answer, but I think it depends what you're pitching and where you're pitching it to. Yeah, super annoying answer, I know.
No, I think a fair one.
I think so. I tend to write pitches that are for features or essays, and for those, they're completely different. If it's a feature, there's not much of my personality in it, unless I'm trying to sell it in the way that Jack was just talking about, and then suddenly the personality's there. If when I wrote for Vogue Business for the first time, I didn't have a single business byline or a fashion byline. It shouldn't have been in that woman's inbox, but I was there. And so there was a lot of my personality in that because it was specifically about influencers and I knew loads of them. And I'd written vaguely about other stuff before. So I kind of hammed up the personality element there and blended it with Jack's advice, what he was just saying. But if it's an essay, I'm going to bring a lot more of my personality and tone into that because that's the real core of what essays are. And I never write them or commission them, but I imagine it's the same for opinion or comment. And I'm sure someone else on the panel can tell me if I'm right or wrong there. But I imagine if you're going to be writing an opinion piece or a comment piece off of a TV show or something like that, you would absolutely have your personality in there because it's not one of those things that's a scoop or an uncovered story. It's a thought that lots of different people could have had, but the piece is ultimately about that writer's voice and what that writer is bringing. So yeah, annoying answer. It really depends where you're pitching to. I'm sure Jack would be able to say yes or no here, but if it's a lot of business stories, I imagine the story's speaking for itself and you're not putting too much of your own.
The problem is there's too much personality in business. There's too much. It's full of people. It's just full of people walking around going, "Hey, finance is really cool." It's like it's really not. Just get to the point. I agree on opinion. I've had. I think if you're going to write in a first person way, then by all means. And the only thing I'd add is it might depend how well you know the editor. If you're pitching blind and cold, I tend to need to know what you've got and what you're going to say, but don't kind of open with 50 words of stand-up and then you're not emceeing at Jongleurs. You're giving me a pitch, so just give me a pitch. I tend to avoid it at first maybe, and then when you're a bit more experienced and got a better sense of things, then start bringing in your own voice. It's not essential when you're starting out, I don't think.
Yeah, I think some new journalists maybe feel a bit of a pressure to almost start writing the piece when they pitch as well. That's something that I see a lot, and I think it can be off-putting for the editor just because it feels like we can't be flexible with it. Like there's no room to enter our publication into this already kind of solidified thing. And yeah, I've mentored a few younger journalists as well. And a thing that I'm having to say quite often is like you're talking like you're broadcasting in this email, like you're already telling the story to like a huge audience, and it just needs refining that bit more. So I think it is possible to put too much tone and personality into an email, but yeah, depends on the medium.
No, that makes
I have to very quickly. As someone who now looks at pitches to deal with human rights stories, people are very angry about human rights issues, as they should be. But sometimes their personality comes in to the point that all I hear is anger in the pitch, and there's no actual clear idea of what the story is. It's just they're angry about the issue and they want to write about it, but maybe you could just tweet about it. There are a lot of these issues that people could just tweet, but then they send me like a 1,000-word pitch, and it's just really unfortunate because I can't commission that. There's nothing there for me to commission. It's just an angry email you send me about an issue you're passionate about. So there's a line, I guess, you have to teeter, and that just comes with the publication that you're actually pitching to and what you're writing about, rather than you as a writer.
That makes absolute sense, and there's a lesson for all of us there. You can't commission anger, so straight from an editor's mouth there. I've got a couple of questions. I'm just keen to get through all of them because we've got about 10 minutes left. I think I'm going to ping back over to you, Jem, if that's okay, because I feel like, again, you might have an insight into this. It's from Matthew Bird, which says, if I don't have many bylines, how can I convince an editor that I should write the article and not someone else more qualified and experienced? Matthew talked specifically about tech science, which I know isn't necessarily your area, but I think there's probably some wider lessons there that you might be able to offer some advice on.
I think there's two things there, and I think one of them we've potentially touched on already, around the idea of why me if there's a lot of other people kind of in that area. And I think the first thing is to always make sure that you are actually pitching an idea and not a theme. And I know we've touched on this before, but I think it is incredibly easy to, especially if you're kind of going off the back of something that's already been discussed, you really have to come in with an original idea. And that could be that you've got some specific insight because of your background. You know, that doesn't necessarily have to be a journalism background. You might have done some research in some area, you might have some interviews. So I think really honing in kind of, you know, first off on what it is that you've got that is different. I think personally, you know, I specifically try to commission people who are kind of just starting out. So from my perspective, I'm never that interested in what bylines they've had before. It's more about making sure that that idea is actually unique. And given that we are such a small publication, I would say it's genuinely really surprising how many identical pitches that I get. And another question that we get so often, I know where I'm going slightly off piece to, is that, you know, I pitched an editor my story, they rejected it, and then I saw something similar going up the next day. And the one thing I would say is that for 99% of the time, that is just because a lot of other people had the same idea. So I think the most part of it is just really honing down to make sure that you've got something that's really different, and that you've done that groundwork, so that when you come to the editor, they want to pick you because you've got something that kind of stacks up, you've got some interesting access, you've got something that's there already. So I think that's the real kind of thing to focus on. And also just making sure that pitch is as polished as possible. If you haven't got those bylines there, I want to get a sense just from reading the pitch that this is a person that can write. You know, if it's got grammar errors, if you spelt my name wrong, you know, I've got my name and the outlet's name spelt wrong a variety of different times, and that doesn't scream to me that this is someone who's going to be able to do a good job on this piece. So I think it's a mixture of those two things, and just not to overthink it. I think the main thing is the story, and if I like that story and it looks like a well-written, you know, 3-4 paragraphs, then that's going to be something that I'm going to reply to you and follow up with.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you. I am going to switch up what I think has been a broadly very successful model. So if this all goes Pete-tongue, then I apologise in advance. And I'm going to quickly go down the row of our speakers and ask you to give a very brief answer to Daniela's question, which is, I think, the perennial question, often one that I get asked quite regularly, which is, what would you say in terms of waiting between pitches? How long do you wait before pitching to another publication? So I'm going to go Dhruva, Jack, Beth, and then Jem. If you can just give, you know, a couple of sentences on basically how long you think people should wait before in between their pitches. So Dhruva first.
I think it depends on the urgency of the topic you're writing about. If it's a comment piece or you're responding to something that's happening in the news, then if they don't come back within 24 hours, move on. Freelancers also have to understand that, you know, just as you can sell your material to as many different publications as you can, editors understand that if, let's say, the Guardian says no or hasn't responded and iNews says yes, go with iNews even though the Guardian comes back, just because it's first come, first serve. But if it is an evergreen pitch or a pitch that you have been working on for a while and a topic that is unfolding over many months or years, have patience. I give it usually 3 weeks to a month before moving on, especially if it's a piece, an essay I'm envisioning, because in the background, I'm still doing research and I'm still writing on it. So I'm in no hurry, but that's just my personal preference.
Perfect. Jack, what's your personal preference?
I'm not really fussed, to be honest. I would say if you pitch me and I email back 30 seconds later saying yes, and then you email back another 30 seconds saying, oh, someone's already taken it, I'd be like, what? But if, you know, I emailed you 2 hours later and someone else has picked it up, I would be like, oh yeah, okay, my bad, didn't get back to you fast enough. I completely respect freelancers' right to pitch as widely as they see fit, and if someone else takes it, that's a shame. I don't think, if the question is like, oh, when should I expect an answer by, that varies a great deal. I'd say usually within 24 hours. But otherwise, if it's about etiquette, then don't worry. I would pitch as widely as you want and as often as you want. Maybe give an hour or two if it's really urgent, but otherwise I wouldn't worry about it, to be honest.
Perfect. Beth?
Really glad Jack said that, because I thought I was going to be the one to come on here and be like, I throw the net out personally, not in a please somebody take this God kind of way, but if I have a story and I think there's a few different publications that would probably want it with a slightly different angle, I will send them all out at once. I've got bills to pay. So, and I've never had an issue with it. I see a lot of journalists being like, don't do this, but in my experience, I've not had one editor mind when they've come back in a week or 2 weeks. I've had editors come back in 4 months before and said, do you still have this? And I've gone, nope, sorry. And they've really not minded. They've just said, oh, well, I really liked it. Have you got anything else? And then I've ended up getting a different commission anyway, because it's opened that dialogue for us. I have personally never had an issue with sending to more than one place at once. If I've thought of a specific publication and it's the one place I've pitched, in terms of chase ups, I leave it a week. So I won't bother them again until it's been a week. And then I'll start moving it along if I can think of anywhere else that would want it.
Mm-hmm. And Jem, finally, anything to add?
Yeah, I think I agree with most of what you all said. I think the only thing I would add is just, I think the whole thing about it is just about being like transparent. I think sometimes people just panic about it and then get a bit kind of, stuck in the hole about it. And if you just say to an editor, this has gone, sorry, like that's totally fine. So just be upfront and be like, oh yeah, this one's gone, and no one's going to be annoyed with you. And the other thing I was going to add on this kind of idea of pitching to different places is, if you can actually get like a completely different angle out of something, there's no reason why you can't rework something and actually kind of have it in a couple of different places. I did a piece last year towards the end around lack of bonfire night and pollutants because of fireworks. I first got it off in a specialist publication, and then pitched it to Deutsche Welle for their stories as kind of like a broadcast piece. So you can actually, if you think cleverly about it, and obviously you can't pitch the exact same thing with the exact same people, but you can potentially try and get a couple of different ideas out of something that you're already doing, and that's fine.
Perfect, thank you. I'm just going to stick on this topic because there's a couple of things coming off of the back of this, and then I'm going to go to a question in terms of building relationships. So there's a couple of questions here around, should you state the other publications you've pitched to in the pitches? That's probably the one that I would say. I'm seeing shaking heads. I'm assuming the answer is I've personally never done that. So I would suggest not doing that. Does anyone want to chime in on that one? No,
yeah, I would agree and say, I would just say don't do that. I mean, the only time that anyone's ever spoke to me about where else they've pitched stuff is when I've already commissioned it and they've gone, wow, I'm pleased you commissioned it because X didn't. But I'd find it quite weird to feel like I was competing.
Yeah, I think
I once got commissioned by 2 different publications to profile the same person. One was American, one was UK, and I just played them against each other to get the most money for myself. So you can always do that.
That is impressive. In terms of, so I just want to, I'm conscious of time, so we've got like 6 minutes left. There is a question here, which I think is a good one. It's from, where was it? It's from Louis, who asks, how important would you say building up relationships with specific editors is? Jack, can I go to you for that one? How often do you sort of commission things from people you know and trust versus otherwise,
It's definitely very important, and it's definitely something you should aim for. I wouldn't know how to do that as a freelancer, I must say. I mean, I have regulars. I have people who write for me several times a month. My contact with them tends to be much more, to the point, short emails, even Twitter DMs sometimes, because I know them. I know they can deliver. So it's very important. I mean, how important? Well, if you have a good relationship with 6 commissioning editors as a freelancer, then you're living the life of Riley, aren't you? You can pitch quick fire, you can give half-baked ideas. I do pay more attention to my regulars, I just do. I know what I'm going to get. I know a conversation, abstract conversation will lead to something because I know they're going to go off and then come back with something. So knowing someone is really important, and my big priority at Insider is developing a European/UK base of freelancers I use regularly. So it is, I can't think of anything more concrete to say than, yeah, it's very important. In terms of concrete advice, maybe think about what you specialize in, and who you'd most like to be writing for in that sense. Maybe target, B2B specialist publications who you can kind of really target, and then pitch to them, and then broaden that out. But I haven't got much concrete advice on that, but I'd say, the stronger and more consistent the relationship is. Don't be afraid. Okay, here's one concrete thing. Don't think rejection means you can't pitch that editor again. I've commissioned people on like the 4th or 5th time. It's absolutely fine. You're not annoying. I have people who pitch again and again, and I don't commission them, but I don't for a moment like not read the pitch or just resent them. It's absolutely fine. It's completely normal. If you, as an editor, you really want to work with, don't be put off. They said no 3 times in a row. If you want a relationship, you persist in that relationship.
And hopefully, thank you for that, Jack, because hopefully that answers your question, Sammy, which talks about how soon can I pitch again to the same editor after receiving a rejection or another story. Well, the part of it, which is you can do that. In terms of timing, maybe Beth, I'd be interested in your view on this. Do you have a particular time limit in terms of when, say, someone pitches something to you, and on the Thursday, it's the Friday after that too soon? Basically.
Is this for chasing up? Sorry.
Yeah, well, no, I don't think it is actually. I think it's for if they've got different ideas, essentially. So it's for different stories or different. So someone pitches you something on the idea A on the Tuesday, is Thursday to re-pitch you something else. Too soon.
Just sending quite a few. I don't mind. If someone can send me a whole bunch of pitches if they wanted to. I just don't like it when it's all in one email and it's just a sentence, because I want some detail. But I have received 10 emails from the same freelancer in 1 week, and I've done it to editors as well. The only thing I would worry about really is, it's unlikely, but it has happened to me. If you get commissioned for all of them, make sure you've got the time. Because I once sent Vice 4 articles in a week, just thinking, hopefully they'll take one of them. And they took all 4. And then I had to pull some strings to make time happen. So I really don't think there's any such thing as too many ideas, as long as they're all good. And they're not all just packed into one email and they're all quite cold, just one-liners. That being said, I know this is really annoying. I have seen some publications say that they like that. So I was in a very similar sort of event to this with someone from The Independent who said that they love to see pictures like that, just one-liners in an email. It's not for me, and I don't think it's for any feature editor, but opinion, some comment desks is that's the way they prefer. I think some editors do leave their DMs open on Twitter and say that you can DM them and ask how they prefer to be pitched. And if that is one of those people, I would ask them first if you've never pitched them before.
As ever with, I think a lot of these pieces of advice, and we come back to, I think Jem said it, I think Beth has said it, I'm pretty sure every panelist has said it. A lot of this is about personal preference, it's about the publication that you are pitching to. You will not know the personal sort of quibbles or interests of each editor that you pitch to, but with a bit of research, looking at what they've commissioned, look at what they've written, advice from other people, hopefully such as our esteemed panelists, you should be able to get a sense of some of those things. I am going to, we've only got 2 minutes left, so unfortunately I'm just going to have to pause it there. I am just going to, again, in a sentence, go down the panel, if that's okay. Beth, you're on my screen first, so I'm going to go to you first, I think, if that's all right. In a sentence, what's your top tip for freelancers pitching?
Read the publication. Type your idea into the search bar to make sure nobody else has covered it, and type keywords to see what has been covered in the same theme. Check the editor's name, spell it right, and make sure the whole email is also spelled right and it's concise.
Thank you. Jack?
Pitch your top line, pitch your intro, pitch what you are going to say. When your pitch subject line is a rhetorical question, I want to leave the country and change my name and leave journalism forever. It just, to me, suggests you don't know what you're going to find out, and you need to know that. Pitch what you are going to find out as near to it as you can in one sentence. Just do that and you will be most of the way there.
Thank you. Dhruva?
Show me you've done a bit of research and know what you're talking about. Have a snappy headline, a little subject line, so actually know that you have a clear overview of what you're talking about. Read the publication, as Beth says. Read the publication always. And if you're angry, have some clarity. Don't just send us angry emails. It doesn't work. And try and make your pieces evergreen. If you want to come back to it in 6 months, a year, be proud of it. And the last thing I'm going to say is have a sense of belief in your pitches that this piece that you're going to write is going to change the world.
Lovely. Jem, over to you in a sentence.
I mean, I think you've kind of all encapsulated what I would definitely say. I think my main thing.
Sorry, I gave it the short story.
No, it's fine. I think my main thing would be definitely to read the publication. But I guess on a slightly different tangent, I would just say, you know, if you are thinking about doing this as kind of a job, or even if you're not, if it's just something on the side, do be organised with your pitching. Do save your pitches. Look back at what worked, what didn't work. You know, what editors you pitched, what landed, you know, what didn't, and then you can start to build a picture of, you know, where things have landed, where they haven't, and how to change them. And, you know, obviously, you don't do that in the heat of the moment, but when you're reviewing it month on month, that can give you a bit more clarity about which direction to go in.
That's a super helpful piece of advice. Thank you, Jem. Well, that's all the time we have, unfortunately, everyone. So I know we didn't get through to all of the questions, but I saw that the panelists, who are, as I promised at the start, absolutely excellent, were actually going through in the comments and answering some of those questions. So I hope that we got through most, if not all of them. Thank you to our panelists for sharing their wisdom. I hope you found it, well, in fact, I can see from the comments that you found it incredibly helpful. Thank you to all of you for taking part and participating. It was much appreciated. The only final thing I will say is that this is now the end of the first day of SPA, apart from one thing, which I'll say in a second. Do you know what? I saw Jem Collins unmute herself as I said that. This is the end of the sessions for the day. So thank you as ever to all of our volunteers, to those of you who've been around with us for the entire day. It's been a wonderful day, and obviously there is a second day tomorrow. However, there is also the SBA AGM, which is taking place, and I'm looking at Jem because I was slightly confused on the time earlier, at 7 p.m. this evening. That is correct, is it not? No? No.
6:30.
It's 6:30. The spreadsheet I'm looking at is incorrect, and I will blame other people. It is at 6:30, the AGM. If you are a member publication and you have a view as to either A, the leadership of the SPA next year, but B, its future direction in terms of policy, please do, please take part in it. I'm going to hand over to Jem to say anything that I've forgotten to say about the AGM, but I'm hoping that's most things.
Yeah, that's broadly everything. I just wanted to stress that not as boring as it sounds. I promise it'll be fun. Please do come. And yeah, there are positions to run for on the exec, or if you are a working journalist, or you know someone who is, you don't have to be a working journalist. Sorry, what I mean by that is if you've been out of a student publication for a year, we also have one trustee role up for grabs as well. So if you're interested in mine or Richard's job, want to join us, and you want to be a charity trustee, no experience needed. Either of those things would be great to see you. And I promise AGMs are more fun than they sound.
Have 6. Hopefully see you all there. Being a trustee is super fun, I can confirm. Thanks again to all of our panelists. Thanks again to all of you joining. I will leave it there. Have a lovely evening all.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Hope that was helpful.
Bye. Yeah, it was definitely helpful.